To introduce the next speaker, Jean-Marie Molina. She's a senior lecturer at the Rotterdam University of Applied Sciences. And she has done a TED Talk on the importance of making errors. And I haven't had the time to see it myself, but I heard from everybody who has seen it that it was very powerful. So I look forward to your lecture very much. Good luck.
Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to talk to you about your passion, which is also my passion. But I'm going to present to you mentoring and working with students from another perspective. So I want to invite you to come along on this journey with me. And I'm not going to tell you where we're going. Let's see where we end up, and hopefully we'll all have an amazing time, okay? All right. So I never keep still, so please don't be bothered by that. I'm just a jittery bug. Today I want to talk to you about something that I call tough love. That would be, thank you. Thank you. And so my talk is entitled, Changing Stories to Change Lives. What do you see in this picture? Who has an idea? Yes? What do you see? A neural network. What is something that we all have that possesses a neural network? A brain. You are sure that you all have a brain? Can I see all the hands of all the people who say, I have a brain? Just checking to make sure we know. All right. Okay. So my work is centered around the brain. And I know that you will probably be saying, brain and mentoring, what is she talking about? Well, my work focuses on the brain, and it focuses on the role that the brain plays in our learning, in our development, and most importantly, in our experience of the world. Now, I use the brain to help struggling students engaged meaningfully with their own process. And I do that to help them become successful learners. So I mentor students in the context of academic success, dealing with academic retardation, or dealing with just unable to develop and learn according to the stipulations that we have made for them. When I do that, I employ insight and strategy from 3 fields. So today we're going to journey along 3 fields. We're going to talk a little bit about psychology. We're going to talk a little bit about education. And we're going to talk a little bit about neuroscience, all in the context of mentoring and working with young people. Okay. So, and you're going to do a little thing too, because I know you just don't want to sit down and listen to me go on and on and on and on. So let me ask a question. What do you see when you look at this picture? Yes, sir. You see a? No, don't tell me the second thing. Tell me the first thing. You see a frog. Who else sees a frog? So, all y'all are frog people. Okay, all right. Is there somebody else that sees, beside that gentleman, because he's going to spoil our fun? Is there, yes, sir? You see a fish? Who else sees a fish? Yeah, there's a lady, she's like, okay. Is there somebody else who sees something else? Yes? You see a nose. I see a nose too. All right. And I see some people go like, what do you see? Let me show you what else you actually see in this picture? What do you see? What's that? Oh, what do you see? A horse. So tell me something. Bernadine, do you see a frog? Yeah. And do you see a horse? Yeah. Did I change that picture?
It's part of the picture, is it?
It's part. But did I fundamentally do anything to change that picture? No. No. So then how is it possible that you can see a frog and then see a horse? How is that possible? I heard somebody say yes. You got another perspective. That's true. Now let me show you the power of perspectives. First of all, when it comes to the human brain, there is something that I need you to understand. Everything that you have learned about the human brain up to this point, forget about it. I know. It makes no sense. So let me tell you a few things about the brain that you did not know. First off, the human brain does not work the way that we think it works. Do you often hear people say the thing that that makes us different or makes us higher beings is the fact that we are able to think, we are able to be rational? You've heard that before? Forget it. You want to know why? Because here's the first mind-blowing thing I'm going to tell you today. The human brain has not been designed to think. Who knew that? Yeah, we always have some awesome person in the room who knows that. But who didn't know that? Who did not know that your brain is not designed to think? Well, that's the first thing you need to understand. The human brain is not designed to think. In fact, the human brain is designed to do the opposite. The human brain is designed for you to not think as much as possible. So no more saying to your students, use your brain. Not even to your kids. Because your brain is not made to think. But then, what is going on with the brain? Now, first of all, I want to tell you something. We've also been educated and thinking that we all have one brain. How many people here thinks that they have more than one brain? A few hands are going like, yeah, yes. Another mind-blowing fact. We do not have one brain. You don't have one brain. Neither do you. What we have are a dozen, or actually dozens of mini brains, all work together into that thing that we see and we call the brain. So, but what has this have to do with you and what you do? Now, first of all, I want to tell you that there are two ways in which we primarily experience the world. The basic idea, which is the idea that we have had for a very long time, is this. The brain, or we live in the world. The world projects stuff onto us. And we experience the world through our senses. And our senses help us to work with what the world gives us. And what is left is our human experience. So this is a basic idea. Anybody who's done a little psychology has shown us that. So we process the world, and what is left is our experience. But guess what? This is total nonsense. This is not true. This is not how we experience the world. Do you want to know how we actually experience the world? Yes? I love it when people say yes. This is how we experience the world. What happens is that we push back. So the world projects stuff onto us. We, through our senses, we process that, but we push back, which means we influence the world. We create the world. Much so, it's actually, and I'm going to give it to you scientifically, it says, we each possess a system in our brain because we have to be able to push back. We all possess a system, a mechanism that allows us to send signals to every cell within our bodies and also to cells outside of our bodies. And these signals allow us to tweak our cells at a molecular level. And that molecular level allows us to do the following. It allows us to experience the world the way that we think it should be, but not actually how the world is. I'm going to let you digest that for a few seconds. Again, so we experience the world the way that we think it should be and not the way it actually is. So do you know what that means? That means that we literally think, experience, feel the world that we wish to create, the world that we wish to live in, which teaches us that our perception drives our reality. So what does that do for us? What does that mean? And what do I do with that in my work with young people? Now, first of all, I teach young people the following. When you experience the world from an idea that you are passive, so everything happens to you, that stems from an idea that in our prefrontal cortex, that what we call the CEO of our brain network, in our prefrontal cortex, we have a mechanism called a controller. And the controller basically does one thing. It says, no. So I can be speaking to Bernadine, my sister's name is Bernadine, so that's why you're my little mascot, if that's okay. and she would be like, but why the hell is this strange woman speaking to me? And her brain goes, nope, we don't want to hear that. She's smiling at me, but she zooms me out totally. So we have this mechanism that can stop us from interacting, or it causes us to have what I call a zombie mode. Somebody can speak to you and you could be like, but you're not hearing. Have you experienced that sometimes? That you may be speaking to a student and you're thinking, I'm doing my best thing. And your student is like, and you know they haven't heard a word you said. Okay, so the controller. Now, the controller causes us to live in a mode that I call bottom-up processing. I'm going to come back to that in a while. But now, the controller isn't interesting because if we only have a controller in our brain, then the only thing we could have been able to see was the frog, because that's how our brain works, according to that first theory. But you guys just prove to me and prove to each other that that's not the way it works. Because you saw nose, somebody saw nose, somebody saw horse. The gentleman said, I saw two things. So that means our brain must have another mode. It does. This is a very important thing. In our prefrontal cortex, we have another mechanism, a more important mechanism. And this mechanism, of course, it has to be a woman, because you know how we are. It has to be signified by a woman. Sorry, guys. And the prefrontal cortex has what we call a coder. And the coder is the mechanism that allows us to tweak our experiences and causes us to live in the world that we want to live in, and not necessarily in our reality. But here's the funny thing about the coder, and this is what you need to know when you speak to young people and you find that they are stuck in their process. What you need to know is this. The coder is a very time-consuming mechanism. So if our coder was on all the time, we would be asleep like 90% of our day, because it takes too much energy. Our brain cannot do that. And remember I said our brain is lazy, right? She doesn't like to think. Well, it's a he. He doesn't like to think. So this is what happens. 90% of the time, our brain causes us to live in our predictions, which basically means that at this very moment, none of you here are actually listening to me. Don't feel bad for me. Don't feel bad. None of you here are actually listening to me. What all of you are doing, what's going on in your brain right now, is that you are all living in your predictions. So the things that I'm saying, as long as they make sense to your experience, you're fine. You're laughing. You're sweet. But what happens when I say something that comes out of your prediction? That's the question I'm going to answer next. But what is important that I want you to realize here is this. Our young people, the people who we work with every day, they constantly live in their predictions. And as long as they live in their prediction, something important is not happening. They are not learning. They are not changing. They are not developing. So our task, our job, is to get our young people to move out of their predictions and get them to live in the moment, the world as it is, or to create a world that it should be. And that is the essence of what we do. Many people refer to me in my job as a coach, and I say, I'm not a coach. Don't you dare disrespect me by calling me a coach. No disrespect for all the coaches. I am a mentor. And do you know why I'm a mentor? I'm a mentor because by teaching, by modeling, by the things that I do for and with the young people that I work with, I help them to create their own reality. And let me tell you something. If you have not learned anything from the COVID pandemic, then let this be your lesson today. The way that we have been teaching and educating and dealing with our young people is the reason why they are falling apart in this pandemic and due to this pandemic. It's because we have not taught our young people how to create the existence that they want. We have not given them the tools. We live in a society that has made them passive and zombies and caused them to constantly live in their perceptions. But we, those of us who mentor young people, we change that every day, and we can change that. We change that by recognizing that the way our young people live is what we call a bottom-up processing. A lot of our young people feel, well, you know, this happens to me. There's nothing that I can do. This person hates me. I use myself an example. I am the first child to have completed an education in 4 generations. Do you know what that means? That means that my grandmama cannot read. She cannot write. She didn't go to school. Her mother didn't do that either. My mother did not complete any education because my mother fell in love with a dude, and they did a dance, and they created this reality. So my mom had no formal education. I'm the first person in 4 generations of my family to have created a new reality for our family. So this idea of bottom-up processing, you experience the world, there's nothing you can do. When you leave, if you forget me, just remember this. This is bullshit. What we can do is this. We can create the reality that we want to live in, the world as we wish it to be. And we do that by a process called that was bottom up, this is top down. But in order to get into this top down phase, we need to know how do we access that coder, right? That mechanism in your brain. So how do we get it to work? Now, we do that by our stories. And academically, we call that our schemes or our schemata. All our experiences of the world create for us a story. And our stories drive our coder. And our coder drives our reality. So my eureka moment in my work, in my research, came when I realized that in order for me to push my young people forward, I had to do 2 things. First of all, I had to get them to recognize that their reality as they see it is not static. It's dynamic. And it is not only dynamic, it is in their power, in the extension of their ability to change their stories. So if you want to get your young people to move from wherever they are now, you first need to get them to realize the stories that have impacted their lives. In my case, I will tell you, when I first came to the Netherlands, I couldn't speak a word of Dutch. So Bernadine, I studied at Leiden University, one of the top universities here, really good. And I remember that my first day in college, when I stepped in with my old Sony Vaio because I didn't have another laptop, it was heavy, and I stepped in and I sat right in the front, and I turned around, and there were 349 white girls looking at me. And I never felt so black as that moment. And I remember that when I was in college and I failed my first exam. Do you know what that professor said to me? He said to me, well, I'm not surprised that you failed your exam because you can't speak Dutch. And this is Holland. And in Holland, we all speak Dutch. And if you can't speak Dutch, and if you can't come, that you don't belong here. He said that to me. You don't belong here. He tried to tell me what my story was. 4.5 years later, when I graduated at the top of my class, I had a talk with that professor. But the thing that changed was when I told him, I am smarter than you are, sir, But here's what I want you to do. Give me my next exam in my language, which is English, and I will show you who belongs here. And I said, if you fail me, if I fail, I'm going to quit your class. You're never going to see my black butt again. But if I pass your class, you're going to put some respect on my name. And he looked at me. Girl, let me tell you something. I aced my exam. And you know what I talked about? I talked about stories. I changed my story. And I not only changed my story, I changed his, because he's now one of my really good friends. When first he was the guy who told me I don't belong here. So we need to help our young people to change their stories. So how do we do that? Because I know you guys are hungry, so let me just do my thing. How do we change stories? Let me get up a little more here. 3 ways. First, learning. And not learning as in learning for an exam, Learning as in presenting our young people with new ideas, new information. If your students are struggling because of their ethnicity, go find them examples of people in their culture who have been successful. You got me? Feel me. All right. If your students are struggling because they are the only girl who's doing this, then go find them a girl that does that. If your students are struggling because they don't have the right strategies, help them to find strategies that work. So introduce new knowledge. When you introduce new knowledge to your students, their brain is forced to step out of predictor and get its butt in gear, because it no longer can say, well, this is how it is. No, a new experience causes your brain to go like, okay, this doesn't fit in my mechanism. I don't know how this works. Let me go figure this out. Teach them new learning, new information. The second thing is allow them to experience confusion. Who here has ever been confused? Yeah, let me ask a man, because the men are very good at talking about confusion. Have you ever experienced confusion?
I think at a daily level.
You see, I told you, on a daily level. And when you experience confusion, what does that do to you?
It helps me getting forward.
It helps you. But what do you feel when you're confused?
I feel strange.
You feel strange? Who else feels strange? A few people. Okay, what else?
And then I try to learn from it and try to get a better person.
Exactly. Let me give you this is a power thing. All right. So confusion causes a feeling inside you. The first time when you experience something you've never experienced before, you're like, huh? What is this? This is my, I'm almost done. I swear time, people. And so confusion causes the brain to go, oh, this is new. I got to get my butt in gear. I got to come out of my perceptions and live in reality. So you discuss confusion. You say, what is bothering you in this situation? What are you feeling right now? What have I said? What have I done? For example, when I teach, I never ask my students, do you understand what I said? Because I get no response. What I say to my students is this: what have I not explained in a way that you feel like I got it? And then I notice my students, they come out because they're like, oh, but my professor is asking me something about her, what she did. So they don't have to talk about what they can or cannot do. That lowers that frustration. And then they give me the burden of proof. And I show to them, well, if I didn't explain it properly, it didn't do it for you, then I can find a new way. And I work at that with them by modeling with them that confusion is a signaling tool. It says nothing about who you are, but says everything about your process. So don't think that because you're confused, you're stupid, you're dumb. If you're not confused on a daily basis, then something's wrong. Then something is wrong with you. So confusion. And the last thing that we do, and here is why so many of our children are stuck. And then I swear I'm almost done. One more slide and then I'm done. It's failure. We live in a world where everybody is afraid of failure. We all want to be the best. You guys remember Barack Obama? Who said, yes, we can. And the whole world went, yes, we can. And I asked my students, yes, you can. But how many of you are going to be president of the United States of America? So what we have done is we have created a society where failure is something that we avoid at all costs. Now, I'm not saying you're supposed to give a party for mistakes. Don't get me wrong. But what you need to do is help your young people realize that when they fail, this is actually what happens. They are experiencing something that does not fit into their prediction. So failure is an opportunity for them to find out what is missing in their process and how to change that process, how to change their stories, how to change their perception, how to change their reality. So we do not give parties on failure. And here's my last thing, then I'm done. We teach people that failure says nothing about who you are, but everything about your process. And if you do not have indicators of how your process is going, you're never going to get a result. Because if you're baking a cake and you don't know what a cake looks like when it's burned, then you're going to burn all your cakes to a crisp, not true? And think that's the best thing. And if you're driving and you don't know what signaling means, you're going to crash your car. And when you crash your car, well, then you're going to know what signaling meant. We don't want you to die. So create confusion, help them to learn, and failure. And guess why? Because the brain does an important thing. The brain says every time you engage with your reality, when you question yourself, you experience confusion, you talk about failure, your brain goes into a mode that we call theta mode. And you need that mode. Because if your brain is not in theta mode, you will not learn. Say it with me. If your brain is not in theta mode, you will not learn. All right. What happens when we choose to ignore the things that we experience, our failures, our hardships, our problems? Our brain laughs and goes, yeah. Because you know what your brain does? Your brain deletes the entire experience. And within 72 hours, it will be as if you never experienced the thing that you experienced. Now, those of us who say to our young people or say to our colleagues, I don't know how people can do the same thing over and over and over and not know that it's wrong. That's because they do not choose to engage. So here's the crisp of my story for you. Do you want to help young people? You want to empower them? You want them to move? Teach them. Your stories impact your perceptions. Your perceptions create your reality. And your reality changes your life. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was great.
Thank you.